Welcome to the Footy with
Do you want my hat on or off?
It's up to you.
What do you think?
Off, they like better.
They like better. The social people like better.
They do like better, but I'm wearing a hat so you can get fucked. Welcome to the Footy with mates, folks. Happy Saturday. This is a special one. I'm very, very excited to have this person. I wanted to talk to them for a very long time. You may not know the name, potentially, but there's a high chance you're familiar with our next mate's work over a 40-year career. Our next guest has captured some of the most joyous, heartbreaking, controversial, and historic moments in the AFL. Please welcome our new mate, Wayne Ludbey. Hi.
Thanks for having me.
You're a photographer for the AFL, but the reason I've wanted to talk to you for a long time is because I'm very, as with most footy fans, I'm familiar with your work. Yeah. But then early on, you started sharing out Auntie Donna clips at a period, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is incredible. So thank you for supporting us.
No, it's a pleasure. It's nice to see something left field and not cliche driven, which is usually the case.
It was lovely. Thank you for that.
No, thank you.
But you're a photographer by trade.
I am. I'm a long-term photographer. I wasn't much good at anything else.
When did you've been, as I said, over 40 years now as a photographer. Where did you start and why did you start?
Well, I started in the darkroom at year 11 at Kingswood College out in Box Hill. And, I must admit, the ratio of girls to guys was pretty good in the photographic group. So
that's the same with music theatre. Tom and I used to do. We did Anything Goes in year 9 at Viewbank College, which is Rosanna East previously, and we did Anything Goes, and there was 4 boys and 56 girls.
Yeah,
and you know we loved that.
Well, I think there was 14 girls and one guy, me, in the photographic class in year 11 and year 12. So there was a natural sort of attraction to being in the dark.
But then you love the photos as well, I imagine. Did you have the red room, like in all?
Had the enlargers and all the chemicals, and used to love processing the film. And
why is the red room the thing? What did that do?
Well, I think it's the magic of seeing an image come up in the chemicals in the developer, and you're sort of in the tray and you're rocking it. And you see your image come up in black and white, and then you obviously wash it and put it in the fixer, and then you dry it, and then you've got this magic in front of you. Yeah. Why
does it have to be a red room though? What does that do? Why is the film it's just softer?
Well, I think the filters with the red enable you to see, and also I think they were conducive to, the silver in the paper. The photographic paper, which enabled you to project the image, your negative, through the enlarger with the light onto the paper, and that's how it was recorded.
Good to know. I know that now forever now, even though we've moved on to digital and everything. And what did you start out? Did you want to do sports initially, or were you just happy to take it anything? Were you a portrait person?
I've always loved footy. In the days of the radio, there was never anyone more emotional or passionate about football. My dad was a Carlton fan, and so passionate about Mark McClure and all those great players through that. Trevor Keogh, Jeff Southby, Rod Ashman. So many good players.
Is this the 80s or 70s?
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to have actually been to a game at Princes Park when Phil Carman played. He wore the white boots. I think he got a lot of possessions and kicked a lot of goals.
Were the Blues good through that period?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were really, really good, and just so good to support. And they were always involved in Match of the Day, or and later on there was Bazasto, Hunter, and Percy Jones was there, and. So many great names.
I'll tell you what, Princes Park, Tom and I have actually been to a game at Princess Park this year, a pre-season game for the D's in Carlton, but then also towards the end of last year, all the W finals were there. That place still has a fair bit of magic to it.
Absolutely.
And it should have men's games there in some way. It's a bummer that they've turned it into a facility, so it's become this kind of training facility vibe. But those old stands are outstanding.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, a few years ago, they played a few practice games there. And I remember Joey Danaher talking about the energy off the field. Just he could feel that sort of old sort of energy off the grass and the stands and things.
And I imagine for composition as well, it's nicer to shoot an interesting stand like the ones they've got there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite stadium to shoot because of it, the way it composed or the way that the background looks to players? Or
Well, funnily enough, the one I hated was Waverley. Because it was always cold and wet and it was so big.
Yeah. How was the capacity there?
Oh, you're talking 80,000,
yeah,
70,
right.
80,000, but it was just so big.
Yeah.
You know.
All the same as well, though, like around? Did it have the same?
Yeah, it was sort of uniform around, and the stands sort of went quite alarmingly back from the surface of the field. There's quite a gap between the fence and the boundary line as well. So and there was a slope from one half of the ground to the other, so often you would lose guys' ankles.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It had that big of a...
Yeah.
I mean, the MCG has a slight one of those, doesn't it, for drainage, I believe.
Yeah. Well, the G, I probably didn't appreciate the G early on, but towards the end of my career, you know, like when Dane Swan kicked that goal in that Anzac Day game, you know, bursting through the pack of Essendon players.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I've never heard a louder roar in my life. Like, it just blew me away how loud it was. And you know, you can't help but fall in love with the G, especially off the back of, you know, the Richmond two premierships they won there and things like that.
Were you shooting the old Southern stand? Were you like?
Yeah, well, I've actually got a series of photos of when they renovated the stand. So there's that big gap. I think England played Australia in a test match there. Booney was batting and David Gower and that were playing for England. And there's that huge gap in the Southern stand. And I've shot through it.
Oh, that's cool.
It's pretty cool.
That's part of my childhood is when the Northern stand was redone for the Com Games. There's periods where, I forget the year, like Brisbane, I think.
Well, Brisbane won their third premiership, and I've got a picture of them all on the dais with that old green member stand in the background. And the good thing about that was the seats, they had that green paint.
Yes.
And it was all sort of peeling away and things like that, which was pretty cool.
It's good for a photo, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have a theory, and, you know, this is tangenting a little bit. We will get into your career and everything great you've done. But I really feel the MCG should shoot from the Southern stand towards the Northern stand because the Northern stand development now is so stunning.
Absolutely.
It looks like it feels like a mouth the way it encroaches over.
Yeah.
And because I sit in the Northern stand all the time, but the Southern stand has, when you're looking back at it, it's got this huge power to it. And from Melbourne games, it's the only side that's full.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing when you shoot back towards the members' side is the sun. It's backlit.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it's beautiful light. There's like Michael Wilson and Michael Klein at the Herald Sun. Michael Wilson, obviously the AFL guru, but they all shoot backlit. Yeah.
What does match day look like for a photographer at the AFL?
Well, our diet's not great. You know, we normally sleep in.
Do you get a car park at the G or at Marvel?
We get a car park between Punt Road and the MCG, which is very much appreciated.
Oh yeah.
And we have all our gear rumbling around in our back seat, which we sort of cobble together in a bag and make sure we've got wet weather gear.
Is there a camaraderie between all the photographers, or is there a rivalry?
When I first started shooting in 80, 84, 85, they all used to meet in the car parks and have a barbie and a beer. And
really?
And I was a half pot screamer, so I found out pretty quick, especially at the night games at Waverley, that I couldn't drink and take photos. I just couldn't do it. So I used to pretend, I used to spill and pretend I was drinking, and they would knock back half a dozen tinnies before a game.
This feels like pretty much up until maybe 2000, or that most people working at most games, either on field or off, were somehow tanked.
Yeah, well, there was one guy who worked for the Truth newspaper at Waverley who was actually marched off Waverley Park because he couldn't sit on his camera box. He was so tiddly.
Everyone's just completely pissed.
They marched him along the boundary line, the police,
Jesus. Okay, so right.
And most photographers' camera bags in those days weren't full of extra gear, lenses, and film. They were full of
beers and
beers.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah. So you're at the ground. You've had a barbie. Do you go up to the Wrong Casey Media Centre, or
nowadays you put your gear on the boundary line. You cover it up with the wet weather gear, and you head up to the media box and you spend an hour or so just talking with people in the media, fellow photographers or journos, or there's a lot of ex-footballers in the media now. So,
is there a dialogue between journos like Marnie Vinyl at The Age? Does she come up and say, "I want a real good photo of Nick Cox tonight because I've done an article," or is it more just go for broke, get whatever you need?
No, look, there's never much direction, but there's more of a look. They give you that side eye look, like don't fuck it up.
Yeah, great. Yeah, cool. Good to know. And so you spend just the majority of the time down on the boundary, just trying to find moments. And
yeah, well, you nowadays with digital, you've the expectations on a photographer are much greater than they were in the old days. So you've got to do pre-game, file, the warm up, ins and outs, and then you obviously do the banner. From the early 90s on, they used to have banner of the week in the Sunday Age. So you
had to get them
all. You do
the
banner, and then you do the run through, and that's very much in vogue now as well. And then you do the toss of the coin, and then you're into it.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of things you tick off every day.
Yeah.
Something that's a question that's raised in my head as we've been chatting is the way that photographs of AFL have changed in importance over the years. So when you're talking about when radio was the main coverage, you literally, and we'll talk about Nicky in a bit, but that you would literally be the only person capturing images of these games, apart if you weren't the televised game. Whereas today, what is the purpose of photography for football now?
Well, the good thing about photography is that technology is improved every year for the last 20 years. So there were occasions where just because you'd probably be one out at a game. Now AFL have two, one either end, and there were occasions where you'd miss something because you're at the wrong end. Whereas now, I don't think the guys on the beat miss anything. I think I haven't seen them miss anything for a long time. I know they're pretty special.
Wow, just keep moving,
Well, not only their technology is good, but their concentration and focus is good. And they've got the added pressure, which we didn't have when we were shooting film, is they have to file straight away.
So it goes onto a laptop and it's uploaded
and it's pumped out. So it's a fine art between intuitively knowing when to you've taken the Jamie Elliott mark, you've got to file it straight away because you've got Brian Taylor on the telecast saying, geez, I hope he got that. I hope he didn't miss that, And
it is Brian saying that.
Yeah. So, that was Michael Klein. I mean, I can't imagine the pressure he was under I actually messaged him and said, mate, I'm so glad that you nail it. He said, mate, so am I,
Is there a chance? So that's being uploaded immediately? So
so that gets pumped out.
Before he's even seen it, essentially?
Oh, no, he'll probably do a basic Photoshop. He'll do a crop and do a sharpen and just make sure all the colours are okay, and he'll pump it out.
It is funny seeing on the side like these two teams go in a battle and everyone, and then just seeing an open laptop next to a photographer on the side of the thing is so funny.
Yeah.
How is the Wi-Fi? It must be okay.
Well, the Wi-Fi wasn't great, I must admit. It was a battle. I think it's improved threefold.
Yeah, cool.
But that was... They had hotspots at the G, and you used to have to try and find, the big antennae with a hotspot. But
even on a busy day, if they're at quarter time when everyone gets out their phone, you can't get anything there.
No,
it's impossible.
No, Geelong is the worst. Geelong, towards the back of where the Geelong cheer squad is, there's like fast food. There's like the bratwurst.
Is this GMHBA or is this?
Yeah, Geelong. Yeah. So there's a bratwurst, pizza, pie.
What? That's so
but
good.
You're down there at the back of that, pumping it out at quarter, half-time, three-quarter time at the end of the game, while people are stuffing their faces.
Yeah, it must be awful. Look, the reason that I wanted to get you in is because as I said to Tom and my mates, one of my favourite AFL and in particular sports docos that I've seen in a really long time. I think AFL media can become a bit enclosed and not the best at reflecting on its history a lot of the time. And when we do docos or do reflect, it's usually done with a layer of self-protection sometimes, or it's done with a layer of self-interest when certain organisations
Well, it's funny how the mighty dollar can
influence. We might not cover that actually because that might make us look bad for this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
But the ABC, for all its faults,
it's not only AFL. I've found a lot of companies within Australia, they talk a big game in terms of, especially around the voice, about what their companies are going to do. And as soon as the CEO has to place a strategy in front of the board and it possibly could lose that company money, that's when the dialogue changes
too hard.
Quick. Yeah.
Too hard basket.
Yeah.
So the ABC put out a series, and it's only one of 6, and they're all fantastic, and I have no vested interest in this at all. But the series is called I Was Actually There, and it's from the creators of You Can't Ask That, which is also a brilliant series, where they talk to people who were at an event. So the first one of the series is about Port Arthur in 1996. There's another one about the tsunami in 2004. And the third episode is about, what year was it?
Well, it was April, round 4, April 17, 1993 at Victoria Park.
I was 4.
Yeah.
How old were you?
Yeah, 4.
Yeah. And you're interviewed. It's about the day that St Kilda went to Victoria Park, and it talks to all. But I just thought it was so elegantly and thoughtfully put together by that team. It really is fantastic. And your input is so fantastic as
Thanks,
well.
mate.
That I was like, it would be really lovely. I don't want to step on that documentary's foot too much, but I would love to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So you rocked up that day. Would you do one game a week? Because Saturdays was when the majority of games were happening in 93, or was there still Fridays and Sundays?
Yeah, Saturday was the majority of games were on a Saturday, and I'd earmarked that game from the start of the year. And
really?
Yeah, and because Plugger pulled out and there was another big St Kilda name pull out, I thought, geez, that might sort of make things a bit harder for St Kilda. But they had such a cracking start to the year.
How far into the season are we here?
Round 4.
Oh, so early on.
Yeah, they had 3 really good games to start the season with, and unfortunately Tony Locker was out and there was another key St Kilda guy out. So thankfully I did still go to the game. And look, the major achievement in those days was getting a car park in the railway car park.
In Victoria Park. It's still hard now, actually.
Mate.
Even on off day.
I got there at before 12 o'clock to ensure that I got a car park.
Really?
Yeah. So that was and it was a really beautiful, sunny, one of those really beautiful autumn Melbourne days, sunny, crisp, blue skies. So, there was a lot to...
What was it like going to Victoria Park in the 90s?
Well, mate, it was an experience. Whenever I used to sit in front of the social club, and whenever I moved, because I had long curly hair,
like Tom.
Yeah, they there used to be like sheep noises whenever I.
Oh, really? They go you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like and then if I turned around, they go, "What are you looking at, T Cozy Ed? Hey, sheephead? Hey?" And
who else was bad in that era? If you went to
Windy Hill was
bad?
Pretty bad.
Yeah,
they were probably a level up. Like they, my personal safety was in question, and the Essendon fans at the G around that outer side, the southern side, were pretty caustic as well.
They?
Yeah, they were hardcore.
That's the baby bombers as well, isn't it? That era.
That was like Paul Vanderhaar. Terry
Right.
Danaher, yeah.
Sheedy era still.
Sheedy, yeah. Like Windy Hill used to rock and roll. Like there was one day they knocked the Eagles off when the Eagles came into the competition in 87, and it was just rock and rolled all over.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Is it called Windy Hill because it's windy or because they blow hard?
No. It's on a cold, windy day, mate.
Okay. They're at the Hangar now. They should have stayed at Windy Hill.
Absolutely.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a sunny day. Yeah. It's packed out.
Yeah. So I've put my box down in front of the social club. I had one camera. I had a 400mm lens, a wide-angle lens, and a flash, and some film. And sought out my mate, John Fedder, who worked for the Sunday Herald Sun, very competitive friend, and we just used to chat and talk and pass the time before the game started.
Yeah, right. And then so the game starts and it's feral.
Well, it's a really, really great game of footy.
Right.
It's intense, no quarter given by each side. St Kilda got out to an early lead. Collingwood pegged them back. Collingwood had some big names. Tony Shaw wasn't on the field, but they had Gavin Brown, had Tony Francis.
In the documentary, the GM of Melbourne.
Alan Richardson. We played on him.
Seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, very nice guy. Yeah, and just
Gary Pert out there by any chance? Maybe that era. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Old Collingwood.
Yeah, and just watch the game evolve through the quarters. A really great contest. You know how it's just a really great contest between two sides, and you're just totally engrossed in that and what evolves out of the contest, whether there's a score or not a score. So it's thoroughly riveted to the narrative of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then so it gets hit, but then Nicky Winmar and Gilbert McAdam both have blinders that day.
Gilbert kicked 5 goals and
in a Tony Lockett-less St Kilda.
Yeah, and he was seriously, mate. He just in the doco he talks about running amok, and he did run amok. I think Nicky started off really well. I think Alan Richards might have just held his own against him, and I think he might have curtailed him a little bit for the rest of the game up until Nicky kicked the goal from 60 yards out in the last quarter, which sealed the game.
Yep.
So, it was my job as a photographer for the following day's paper to get a picture of either Gilbert or Nicky. Gilbert was further away from me. He was in the middle of the ground. Nicky was closer to me in front of the social club, so I focused my 400mm lens on him, and then, responding to the crowd, he initially... He blew kisses at the crowd. At one point, he turned his ass around towards the crowd.
He just dropped his dax? Or
No, his white shorts were still on.
Yeah.
And then he sort of stood up quite indignantly and said what to the crowd. And next minute, he's lifting his jumper up and pointing to his skin and saying, "I'm proud to be black."
You heard him say that?
I did, yeah. And then... he was the guys that play footy in the AFL and VFL talk about when they win. There's nothing like that state of euphoria when you're with your mates and you're walking off the ground and you've won. And they just say it's the feeling that you can never replace. And he was in that state, totally euphoric. So when I had the series on my 400, I actually got my wide angle, took my 400, put my wide angle on and ran onto the ground. And he ran to the middle of the ground chasing Gilbert, and where they embraced and put their heads together. And Gilbert was saying, "Oh, Cuz, we did it. And Nicky just repeatedly, they were sort of hugging each other. And Nicky was just repeatedly saying, "I'm proud to be black, I'm proud to be black, I'm proud to be black."
It's important to note as well, because we've got a young audience who might not know the story as well and who may not have seen the documentary, but from their account, copped a fair bit of racist over the fence stuff that day.
Yeah, well, when they walked out the race before the game, they copped a fair bit of vilification, and they formed a pact together to play the games of their life to try and beat Collingwood.
Fantastic.
And interesting, that became a yardstick for the rest of the Aboriginal players in the league. Adrian McAdam, when he went there later, a few weeks later, kicked 4 goals in the first term.
Oh, across the league.
And behind me, the social club guys were going, "McAdam, you," and they didn't know what to say.
Oh, right.
Which I sort of took as a minor victory. You know? And then later on, the Eagles, they had Chris Lewis, Troy Ugle, Peter Matura, and one other Indigenous guy, and they formed a pact as well, and they beat Collingwood there, and they walked off as a group together, arm in arm. Again, on Nicky's lead.
What the doc talks about a little bit as well, and goes into far more detail than I will, but the reticence from some of the papers to report or to change the framing of what the photo meant at that point. I think maybe from the Herald Sun at that time.
Yeah, look, I think in '93, although it was the year of Indigenous Australia, I think a lot of, especially the more mature white guys, probably lived in an alternate universe. And First Nations people and their history, or perhaps their slant on life wasn't really understood. So
there was that famous as well, and that the discourse for the week appeared to be, is the AFL racist, as opposed to there is racism in the AFL, and the president.
Well, I think when the Sunday Herald Sun, which had a very large circulation at that time, I would think close to 600,000, was the Bible. footy for most people. The Sunday Age, which I work for, was
the big paper. Is that what they call it?
Yeah, that the circulation probably was 160 at best.
That's the
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So if you've got one paper saying it was a gutsy effort, and the majority of people in Melbourne read that, and you've got another paper saying that it was racial, I'm proud to be black in response to racial vilification, there is going to be confusion, which I knew, picking up the paper the next day, I thought, oh, jeez. So that sort of argument or that sort of conversation has lasted 31 years and it caused me incredible stress. And I'm so thankful that the documentaries, come out and clarified that.
It was clear as day for me, and really happy to hear that. So in the week, the Collingwood president came out and said, essentially, well, I forget his name, unfortunately.
Alan McAllister
essentially said, if the First Nations players, not in these words, act like the white fellas, then we've got no problem.
Yeah,
along those lines.
Yeah,
and that kind of blew everything else up and put any questions to bed about racism.
You can't underplay that. That was a very significant thing that he said and did blow up in his face. So much so that some First Nations people put a curse on Collingwood up in Northern Territory. And if you look back at the Collingwood results after that curse, they couldn't win a game. And they had to actually appeal to that guy that put the curse on to lift the curse, because they just couldn't. I think they had a week after week they just kept losing, and people in the end, people saying it's the curse. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
And I guess we're how many years on now? We're 30 years on, 31 years on now. And obviously, it's still a thing that the AFL is dealing with as a wider community.
Well, it is. You've got Cyril Rioli and his fellow Hawthorn Indigenous guys involved in that dispute with Hawthorn. You've got Adam Goodes, despite his 5-star resume, estranged from the AFL. You've got the Cracker brothers, who are involved in a dispute with Kevin Sheedy, and it goes on and on. So it is.
Do you think on the white? How has the AFL changed with issues like this over the time that you've been around it? Do you feel it's moved in the right direction? Has it changed much? Has it not changed at all?
Look, I think Tanya Hosh and Sean Gorman at the AFL have tried very hard to improve things for. In terms of diversity, not just in terms of First Nations, but also AFLW and being much more open and transparent with modern day issues of young people today. But I think post COVID, I think their wings have been probably clipped a little bit because obviously the financial constraints of COVID have tightened things up and made things difficult for the AFL. They're probably only just starting to recover those financial streams of money, So I think Tanya, she started off in a blaze of glory and she did some really, really good things. And I think maybe just recently she's had her wings clipped.
Gotcha. Good to know. How has it affected you personally? The day you woke up, you were a photographer, and this is something that has stayed with you your entire career and life. How has it changed your life?
Well, the positive side is it's introduced me to the First Nations history, and the layering of their history, and nothing is ever black and white in terms of when you're talking about First Nations history, especially in sport. And before people give opinions or comments about First Nations people, maybe they should just listen to them first, listen to what they've got to say before they mouth off about what's right, what's wrong, what they did, what they didn't do, and maybe just think about where we've come from in terms of what First Nations have been through since white settlement. Just have a really good think about what's gone on. I think First Nations people, especially the AFL, are allowed to have a history. They're allowed to have a story. They don't need white filters. They don't need white sponsors. They're human beings. So maybe before people get up on their soapbox and express an opinion about a First Nations player, either male or female, maybe just to have a think about it.
Love that. And it's a fantastic documentary. I feel like I'm championing it way too much for someone who has no vested interest in it. But I think they're all really good, and right in my wheelhouse. So thank you for your. I found out it was shot downstairs from where we are now. Coincidentally,
the lighting guy was amazing. I've actually come up okay. So I just want to thank him. He did a great job.
It's pretty much a photograph, except you're talking a little bit.
That's it.
It's a lot of photographs put together.
When I did the interview, and I'd had a pretty big off season over Christmas festive season in terms of food and drink, I thought, geez, how's this going to go? But he's looked after me, which is nice.
Great, and a good grade on it, I thought. Good grade. Now, but you've been in footy for such a long time. There are other moments that stay with you as your favourite moments you've captured or where you photographed? Or...
Well, I just love the black humour of footy. I used to love going to training.
Yep.
And when you're dealing with 40 guys who are all fit and healthy, they're earning good money, they're the rock and roll stars around Melbourne. I mean, inevitably there's a good sense of humour,
They're all happy to be there.
They're all happy. They're all,
Even if they're 18th?
Look, it was much easier to deal with the side when they were winning rather than they were losing, especially the coaches,
Sure.
But look, most of the players were fantastic, and...
I'm curious about that. Were there some jerks, or for the most part they were pretty patient?
No, they were really, really good.
Right.
Yeah, and just in the terms of social media now, like the AFLW girls are incredibly good to deal with.
Yeah.
Because they've grown up with social media.
Yeah.
They've grown up without being able to voice their opinion and having an opinion.
Yeah.
And not being gaslighted. And the young guys are the same.
Yeah.
They all want to be photographed.
I can imagine going down to Hawthorn now. They'd be lining up to get a photo.
Yeah. Like Paul LeCure at Collingwood during their heyday under Mick Malthouse said, Wayne, look, we all love getting our photo taken, but for God's sake, have a good idea. When you come down to Collingwood, have a good idea. Don't come down with a shit idea, because you know what? If you haven't got an idea, you end up in the boxing ring. And that's our way of saying this photographer's no good.
Oh, right.
And if you look back at that time, there's a lot of shots of guys in the boxing ring. Yeah.
It's a good way to say they're toughening up over the off-season.
That's right. Yeah. So, that was a good bit of advice. So, I rocked up down there not long after, and it was like I had to do a submission to an advertising agency to get Brodie Holland, in the shower in a white singlet, showing his bare chest. I had to get 4 approvals from people.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but it was, it was a lot of fun. Look, the players, sometimes they weren't overly happy with a photo, and, you didn't get everyone right. But
did you ever hear back people saying, I don't like my photo? You get that?
Oh, look, Robert Harvey, he played, that famous state game where Ted Whitten went around the G with his son.
I was there that day.
Yeah.
I was...
Yeah, the Herald Sun said, look, we need a front page photo for the Saturday. So I convinced Robert Harvey to get his face painted with a big V, blue and big V. And I was so nervous about doing it. The expression on his face wasn't great. Like it was a Robert Harvey expression. Bit flat.
Sure.
And
respectfully.
I went up to the rooms before the game, like he's getting changed. And I said, look, thanks for doing that photo. He goes, oh, mate, that was shithouse.
And
I said, oh, come on. He said, nah, mate, that's shit.
I'm in a comedy group, and very often a publicist will ring you and say, you've got to meet here and meet the Age or the Herald Sun or the Sydney Morning Herald photographer.
Yeah.
And it's always, you've got to try and think of a new thing every time. I think one time during Comedy Festival, we had to meet a photographer down at Birrong Ma, and there was just some kids skating. We're all right, we're just hanging around with this, and got some 12-year-old kid to do a jump over our heads. Just go. There was another guy who got a bunch of lacquer bands, and we had to put them all on our heads and do our faces. And photographers love a jump. If you jump in the air.
Well, if you didn't have one of those little trampolines at the Herald Sun, you couldn't get a job. That's why all those Melbourne Storm guys are flying through the air.
How many puppies and baby sheep have you taken photos
It was more when an AFL or a player had a baby.
Yeah, right.
And funnily enough, they never had the wives in the photo. It was just all of a sudden these babies just appeared. And
look what I found.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, great. Do you love footy still?
Yeah, I do. I'm a really passionate footy supporter and follower, and just love the contest. The players have got bigger, stronger, fitter every year since I started shooting it in 85, 86.
They've gotten bigger, strong. Do you think footy's gotten better? Or
absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, there's no comparison.
Really?
Like most the guys that when I started shooting in 84, 85, they wouldn't survive a training session, let alone a game. I mean, come on.
They're all tanked, aren't they?
Well, let's be serious. The train, like you see, I used to watch Joel Selwood and Tom Hawkins and those guys down at Geelong train during pre-season. Like Tom Hawkins, there was one session at the end of the session, it was like a 2.5 hour session. He was on the ground being nauseous in the grass. Like,
yeah, he's running, and then he's a full
he just
forward.
Absolutely gave everything. This is in January.
And this is not like Hawkins. I don't think is unfair, but he's not the ones who you think, oh, he's the one running 30 Ks a game.
Yeah,
He's the full forward, but he's still there getting there.
Yeah, and and it's not like he was nauseous once and he got up. He was on the ground being nauseous for over 3 or 4 minutes, and I was in that position. Or do I photograph it or don't? And I thought. I didn't, thank God, because it would have been incredibly bad taste. But you see Joel Selwood, his running patterns and what he did pre-season were they would just knock you for six, And
he was a nutter on running and.
He was just very, very fast, and it just never stopped, And you could see that when he in his prime, he used to split the packs, running through them. And quite extraordinary. And I think every year it's got better and better. I was lucky enough to spend 3 years at Richmond, and it was interesting to see footy from the inside, looking out.
You were the photographer for Richmond?
Yeah.
Right.
So they thankfully included me in a lot of their strategy meetings and showed videos. So they would rock up. What
year is this? Sorry to jump in.
So this is just at the start of COVID.
Oh, right. So the Hardwick,
Yeah. So when they went to training, they would sit them down in the studio, the amphitheatre, and they would go through what their goals were for that training session.
Right. That much.
Yeah. This is what we want to do. This is how we execute. They would have results of games where guys had executed things properly and perhaps not executed it properly.
In training.
And Richmond had D1, D2, D3. So they say if any team gets through our third D3, we're in trouble, which towards the end of Hardwick's reign they did. They
did like a plan A, plan B, plan C.
So defensive 1, defensive 2, defensive 3. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I bet you Melbourne don't have that. I bet you Melbourne don't have
that. Funny with Melbourne, David Neitz is still our best forward.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. I know, since he left.
Yeah, I know. Can we get Jesse?
Brad Miller, and Brad, not bad, and then since then, we had Hogan, but not the best of Hogan.
Can we get Jesse Hogan back?
Wouldn't that be
seriously?
Nice? Yeah, no, it's not happening. He's too good now. So I've got a question about Dimmer, because he's at the Suns now.
Yeah.
What do you think what would if he walked in and implemented at the Suns, do you reckon? The D1, D2, D3, you reckon? Or is he still on D1 with the young kids?
Look, I think the assistant coaches these days have a really large input into the coaching of the teams.
Right, okay, yep.
And Dimmer would oversee all those assistant coaches with a messaging. But he's very much the boss.
Gotcha.
But I think the game is so big and there's so much demands on those coaching groups, especially post-COVID, that those assistant coaches, they're almost individual coaches within themselves, forward, back, midfield.
Right.
And what I found at Richmond, it wasn't so much what you saw on Punt Road Oval, it's what you didn't see. They had a lot of things off the oval, sessions of things that they would do every week. It's like a job. Like they had one day off a week, but they would get into Punt Road and, they would do boxing, they would do tackling, they would do meditation, they would seek psychologists and psychiatrists, and
it keeps going.
Weights, obviously swimming post-COVID, and then they've all these other things that they would do as well. That
you missed out on.
I missed out on.
You were
so that sort of blew me away. To me, they became like thoroughbred horses. Their diets, their exercise, their minds. They were just totally attuned to the upcoming game. And I remember having a conversation with Robbie Tarrant, who come from North Melbourne, played 200 games to Richmond. And I said, mate, look, is it just me? I'm really struggling to keep up with the strategies week to week. He says, mate, even we struggle. The game's changing week to week. So from a guy that's played 200 games, I felt quite fascinating.
That is, I wish we had more of an insight into that. It would be really lovely. But talking about insight, this has been just such a lovely chat. You were so generous with your time, and I changed the time on you like 48 times.
That's right.
So I really, really appreciate you coming in today. I'm certain our audience would have loved this one. So Wayne, we'd love to have you back another time. We could talk for hours.
You. Absolutely.
Thank you, Wayne. And if you're watching, I want you to go and bounce that pill.
Go D's.
Go D's, yes.